Hello and welcome to the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Global Summit Series. Today I have a special guest who I know you're going to love. His name is Kenny Mammarella de Cruz, and Kenny is the man whisperer. He helps men achieve their life, relationship, and career goals. Kenny facilitates workshops, works privately with individuals, partners, and has held men's groups for over a decade and a half. He trains men, women, therapists, coaches, and anyone who wants to communicate better with men to hold safe, conscious spaces to allow men to be heard and turn their lives around. Kenny's incredible life journey has taken him from refugee camps through overcoming OCD and mental health issues to working with Mother Teresa and taking part in danger sports all over the world. Turning around his own traumas and dramas has enabled him to meet men where they are and facilitate life-changing shifts in perspective and life. He loves sharing his tools to help others consciously embody their potential and meet all of life's challenges. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome Kenny to our show today. How you doing, my brother?
Thank you. I'm doing very, very well, and I'm very chuffed to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, we were just having a conversation before we began, which I'd like to invite you to elaborate more on, about what you were calling toxic femininity, the yin and the yang, and how men are involved in this process and what women's role is also. So I think it's a great place to start. So if you would, so let's speak a little bit about that.
Cool. So I don't know about you, but in London, it's all the rage. Me Too, toxic masculinity, etc. And what really upsets me is the way that toxic and masculinity seem to go together, and it seems to be about men, where for me, there's masculine and there's feminine in every man and woman, and everything across the board. So if masculine and masculinity is yang and loud and out there, and feminine is yin, and it's more soft, and it's more kind of withdrawn, it's more in, then toxic masculinity is overdoing the loud. And what I've noticed, and it's very strange, I would say the two things, after 16 years of running men's groups, the two things that I would say run men more than anything is, on one side, the fear of abandonment and humiliation. On the other side is guilt. And it's like, I can't bear causing pain, being in pain, and feeling pain. So what we've been talking about quite a lot recently is the way the strongest, most, powerful, even bullying man can crumble as soon as he is withdrawn from. And very often it's from women. I mean, again, it's not necessarily a man-woman thing. It's more a masculine-feminine thing. But generally, the men turn into little boys as soon as they are withdrawn from, as soon as there's the silent treatment, as soon as they fear criticism. And for me, that's the toxic feminine. So there's good and bad in everything. This is, I guess, the toxic, the way that people can control. That's not to say it's wrong or bad, because not everyone uses this as a way to control and a way to cause pain. I know that I've done it when I'm angry in the past. Rather than going, wah, 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 I've withdrawn. And I haven't thought that this withdrawal could actually be even more painful than blasting something out, and at least people know where they stand. But that withdrawal, and I remember I was hanging out with a Japanese girl who I got to know very well. And we did a training called Playback Theatre, which is all about improvisational training, theatre. And we were talking about our childhoods. And there was a part where we were expressing anger. And everyone else in the room thought, why is she sitting in the corner looking away, being quiet? Does she not understand what we want? And it took a while for us to realize, well, she explained to us that in her culture, anger and rage is withdrawal.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's expressed. I don't know whether this is her community. I don't know the Japanese culture, but it's so interesting the way different cultures, and I would say I was brought up in a nice Catholic family in late 60s, I guess mid 60s, early 70s in Uganda. And parenting, very basic parenting, was want the boy to behave, withdraw. And that's more what the women did, where the men might shout, but the women would withdraw. And that was a lot more powerful than shouting.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's like, it hurts. What
Yeah.
do I need to do to stop that pain? I'll
Well,
do
yeah.
anything. I'll say anything.
That's interesting because a lot of times in our culture, what I find to be true, it's like, a lot of times you think, well, I'm louder, so I must be right, which is kind of a, if I yell louder at you, then hey, I'm going to prove my point and I'm right. But it's very interesting to see the cultural differences, how people deal with their emotions and feelings and anger. And I always say, emotions buried alive never die. So I think whether it's anger, we'll talk about anger. I think anger, like put out there in a healthy way, because I do believe getting the anger out is healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. I've had this situation with family members. Well, you're angry. You're angry. Yes, I'm angry, and I have good reason to be angry, and I'm not going to stuff it down and make myself sick, and then have resentments and feelings towards you or anybody else. I'm going to get it out. And I like to add the caveat, and it may seem counterintuitive, to express that anger with compassion. And I believe with practice and mindfulness, we can do that. So getting anger out, I think, is a very healthy way to be. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've come out with a new line, and I can't believe how much I get away with this line. And I've used it with my wife. I've used it with my friends, where I would say, because of toxic femininity and people not knowing what's going on, and especially with men, because the big difference for me between men and women is we have different hormones. And with men, there's testosterone. It's quick, it's immediate, and it's got to happen now. And there's a short attention span. Where with women, it's like this whole field of thought, down to detail, down to everything has its place, and it all makes sense, and it comes together like the most incredible symphony. So with that, and I know that when I was a lot more feminine when I was younger, I had that, and I could work in that area. And then I changed, and I became a lot more masculine, probably in my 30s. And my attention span went whoosh, and I couldn't do it anymore. And I feel so lucky that I've had both aspects. So what turned for me into this glorious field of detailed filing that made perfect sense with everything in its place, that turned into a minefield, because it's like, if I step 1 foot wrong, if I say the wrong thing or I use the wrong words, then I'm going to step on a minefield and I'm had.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But isn't it about creating a safe and sacred space within your whole life that you can live authentically? And I believe we I don't want to say should, but I'm going to say it. We should be able to emote and express how we feel without the fear of, okay, it's going to have this kind of reaction on somebody else, because that's their stuff. It's like the 4 agreements. Take things personally, and don't make assumptions and all. So it's I think it's just really important to speak from your throat chakra, from your Vishuddha, like speak your truth with compassion, and like Crazy Horse, the First Nations people Crazy Horse, the Lakota chief said, the truth is bulletproof, and I really fully believe that it is. When you tell fibs or lies, it's self-perpetuating, because one lie leads to another. So when we speak our truth, it's up to the other person. They don't have to accept or resonate with that truth, but the truth is out there, and then you could go from there. I think that's a good way to be anyway. I don't know how you feel about that.
In the ideal world, in a world where there are no menstrual cycles, there are no menstrual cycles, There are no hormones. Everyone sleeps well, and there's no anxiety. Perfect. But I believe that I know that, there's just been a full moon, and a lot of people get anxious. A lot of people get sensitive. A lot of people cover and survive that sensitivity through anger. Fuses are shorter. So it's fine to speak from the heart, but I really needed to learn that it's my responsibility when I communicate that the other person hears me and understands. Not that I have impeccable communication and I couldn't be faulted, but my communication needs to be understood, and that's my responsibility more than the other person, because it's my communication. So I would say that on one hand, and I would say on the other hand, for example, there's Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, impeccable, and the perfect tool for passive aggression, unless what you just said, unless there's that heart connection. Once there's the heart connection, then we're coming from truth. And then things can really work because we're both in alignment, on the same side, and listening. And I would say one of the biggest gifts that I give, or I'm trying to give, at least to Londoners or humanity, is to be able to listen to men, to be able to hear men. Where very often when a man's in trouble or a man's vulnerable, then it's like other people might want to fix him or save him or upstage him, or sadly say, don't worry about it, it happens to all of us, have another drink. And people don't know how to meet a man and how to be with a man in a place of pain. So, I mean, it's very, very well known. And I feel that this has saved so many relationships where I have learned to say to my wife when she's debriefing a day, before you carry on, do you want me to fix anything or do you want me to listen?
So do you want me to be a man or do you want me to embody the sacred feminine is what you're saying, you know?
And the thing is, when she says, I want you to listen, on one hand, it's a relief. On the other hand, it means, so that means that you have to be in pain as you say this, or at least my projection is you're in pain. That will bring up my pain, and I have to sit with my pain without fixing it and be in this space with you until it passes. Meanwhile, as a maybe an immature man, I couldn't deal with pain and I'd have to fix. As a mature man, it includes my feminine, which means I can feel it, I can be with it, I can sit with it, and I can let it pass.
Yeah.
The line that I am blown away that I get away with is when I say, the crap in your head is worth gold when it comes out of your mouth. And I find that so many people, it's like, I'm going to think this through and I'm going to get it right. And I'm not going to go up in that minefield and I'm not going to be criticized. And I know I can do this right. Meanwhile, there's a disconnection from the conversation. The only connections in my head, and it's a connection with fear. So I've lost the connection with you. I've lost the connection with love. And it's like, it's going on here. And then when something's said, the other person needs to kind of second guess what that second guessing was about to have a conversation in theory.
That's exhausting.
No one knows what's going on. But whatever comes out of the mouth, even and especially if it's a mess, it's like, here are my messy thoughts and feelings. Now, where are we with this? And it's worth gold because there's love in it, there's fear in it, there's history in it, there are insights in it, there are pearls of wisdom. Who knows what's in there, but better out than in, and better shared safely, because then something can really, really start.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. It's I mean, really, there really are only two things: is love and this fear. And if you take a look at that, when we're not in that love place, then we're absolutely in the fear place. And if you're conscious about that and aware, I think it's a lot easier to feel into, okay, where am I at right now? Am I being in a loving place? Am I coming from the heart? Am I listening to this person? Am I being present? having compassion, all those things, that awareness gives us the opportunity to shift maybe back into that heart space, out of our heads. And, the shortest journey is from our head to our heart, but we take all these crazy serpentine routes to try and figure things out when it's also very simple. Like you were talking about, like with women. I mean, Marianne Williamson says a woman's greatest psychic need is to be cherished. And part of that, I believe, is to be listened to. So if you observe women, what they do for each other, and it's intuitive, they sit and they listen to each other's stories, and they don't do what the men try to do. We intuitively, we want to fix it. We want to make things better. And they're not asking us for this. Just like you were saying before, do you want me to fix it or do you want me to listen?
Exactly.
So how much healing comes from just being present and listening to somebody? It's incredible. That's like really such a great gift that we could give to anybody in need that just wants to have an outlet to be able to share. And we just listen. We don't have to judge. We don't have to fix. We don't have to do any of that. Just be present and in the moment. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
And
yes,
that's where, go on.
I wanted to ask you, because a lot of this work that both of us are doing is about healing traumas. Now, you went through a lot of different traumas in your life. I don't know all of the different things. So if you would like to share that with the audience, like what kind of things that you went through and how did you find healing and a way back to, or just getting to a place of balance and feeling healthy and whole?
Yeah. Well, some of my traumas were quite life-threatening. As you asked that question, it reminded me of this very strange emotional memory that I had. And this memory was like, for years, did I betray my mother? So I'm a refugee from Uganda. My family were on the death list. The Secret Service were after us. Our phones were bugged. We had death threats by phone. We were followed and we had to go into hiding. And while we were in hiding, and I guess my family were a little known, my mother used to run the Catholic bookshop that supplied all the unis and the churches. I had the best toys in the country. My father ran the parcel department, so for the Uganda post office. And I think he might have got on the death list because there were a few people that were supposed to be killed that he took out of the place where they disappear. And there was a lot of violence. People were taken into a back room and they were beaten to a pulp. And he risked his life and put a stop to a lot of things, an awful lot of things.
God bless him.
Yeah, so we were in hiding and we stayed with my aunt and uncle after a phone call saying we're going to come and kill you tonight, which was very thoughtful. My father had a friend in the Secret Service who he went to school with, so we got to know what was going on the inside. And then the guy said, your name is quite high up now. We've never met, we don't know each other, this is the end. So, and my fantasy is maybe he had something to do with the phone call saying we're going to come and kill you tonight. So that's when we went into hiding. So the memory is something around my mother and soldiers and my abandonment, but it didn't make any sense. And it took a lot for me to try and, because if we talk too much, then especially when we were surviving, someone might crack. And if one cracks, we might all crack. And if we crack, then much as, my father, so we left without him and he was smuggled to Italy on the day he was supposed to be killed. So there was a lot of trauma. We were bullied and abused in refugee camp. And then when he showed up again, he was different. We went to his refugee camp. So with all of these things, we were surviving. We couldn't afford to talk about things. We had to hold it together. So I couldn't ask questions, and I didn't want my mother to be carrying all of this. And my brother and I had a lot of questions. And I realized also the way that people, certainly including me, have false memories. And one of the false memories I had was at the airport before we were taken away. my father putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, you may never see me again. You're the head of the family and you have to take care of your mother and brother. I don't know if that actually happened or not. But what I do know is before we left for the airport, my father, brother, and I were just lying down on a bed, and my father started crying, which is very out of the ordinary. My brother ran to my mother, and apparently he said it then. He might have said it later, I don't know, but then gaps get filled, and we're talking about emotional and logical. So my mother, I asked her to write a book to get it all out of her, so she's not carrying it. And also, so we had information to basically to set us free.
Yeah.
There was one. I'm going to have a quick drink so I can talk instead of cry.
Yeah. That's
there
a
was
story. That's a lot to go through. So I'm really curious how you got yourself through it. Yeah. Yeah.
There was one part in the book that just made sense of my strange memory, and that's where my mother and I walked to the end of the road near the main road, and there was a truck full of soldiers. And in those days, the soldiers just shot people or they locked them up. If more than two people were standing in the street and talking, it's a conspiracy against the government. You're locked up or you're shot or whatever. So my mother and I were there. I was 7. So all of this happened when I was 7. And the soldier, who was, I don't know, the head soldier in the truck, saw my mother, told her to stop. The truck went further, turned around and came back. I don't remember this. And my mother basically, hold on. Apparently, she told me to run back home. I don't remember. She might have said it in a way as if we're playing a game or something, I don't know. But she thought that that's where she dies, basically. So at some level, I had a memory that I abandoned my mother and something happened. What actually happened is this head soldier guy was someone, we would employ a lot of people to work in the house, to work at the book, where the more people we employed, the more families we were providing for. Yeah. So this guy basically wanted to say, it's me, don't you remember, you employed me and you did me so much good and my family's doing well and now I've got a really good job as a soldier. And she told him off for freaking her out like that because she thought she was going to die. It's like, fine, you're pleased to see me, but give me a break. I thought that was the end of my life. So I had all of these memories and thoughts and everything else. And through this, I developed obsessive compulsive disorder, Tourette's. I'd twitch, I'd grunt, I'd have nightmares, I'd have suicidal thoughts. You know, I had all sorts of things going on. Yeah. What I had to learn was that somehow I need to get off my addiction of adrenaline and off my addiction of who's angry at me or what's the danger around me and calm myself enough that I'm present and connected. And I'm not, it's like basically turn the fear into love. Yeah. And that's what I needed to do. And I basically learned it by breathing, by slowing down and breathing, getting back in my body, relaxing my muscles, relaxing my hands, my shoulders, my bum. I was like this and I was never breathing and I was on full alert because, you know, there was racism when we moved into the small town after refugee camp. So it was almost like we have to survive. So on one hand was the breathing. On the other hand, I needed to set myself free. I call it time travel these days. Yeah. I needed to set myself free from whatever it was that I was running away from the bogeyman. So I learned that as soon as I had a fearful feeling, whether it was negative or fantasy or whatever it was that was going on, rather than avoiding going to that place or denying it or being small to it, I moved into it. rather than stopping breathing and feeding it,
Yeah.
I breathed into it and I felt that fear. And then of all things, I learned to feel the fear, follow the feeling back, and it always took me back to the incident or the moment or the part of my life that was the scene of the crime. And rather than remanufacturing situations to feed my fear, I went back to the source of the fear, and I learned how to get the man in me to take care of that scared little boy in me. So I'm not sending the boy into the war zone or my fantasy war zone, but the boy knows he's safe. And the man in me can be present and connected and respond to life rather than reacting and recreating. And that's the time travel that I teach people now, is breathe into it and feel where it takes you and take care of that part. And it's the same thing works in the future. People can be really scared of, I don't know, speaking on stage or whatever it is, or going on a date, falling in love. And I say, look, get into the feeling, be clear about the life you want, the day-to-day life with this woman of your dreams, and feel into it. Move into that place and really feel it. And when you go on the date, then you take that feeling rather than your fear and bring it present to the date and see if it fits. But this time travel shenanigans seems to be working a treat.
You ever read The Time Traveler's Wife? There's a lot to be said for time travel, but yeah, that's awesome. It's really all about being in the present moment, because the past is it's past is a lot of trauma and when like what coulda, shoulda, woulda, and the future is not guaranteed. So it really is all about being present and being in the moment. And what you were talking about, which is amazing story. I'm glad you survived, my friend. Otherwise, I'd be sitting here talking to myself right now. But I mean, I just see what you went through, and in many different ways. So many of us are in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, like every day of our lives, and that like cortisol, that just and the adrenaline that pumps through our bodies. Our bodies are not able to really decompress and relax. We're in a state of stress so often, so much of the time. When you really stop and think about it, it's like, wow. I talk to so many different people, men and women, like they're stressed all the time, and they don't have a regular or daily practice to meditate or just even sit and chill and just not let all these little buzzing annoyances get us all stressed out. And it's so important to get that that serotonin and the dopamine going, rather than being that fight or flight cortisol buzz. That's really very unhealthy. That's what makes our bodies like shut down, and we get ill from that. So so what you're saying is very important.
I was addicted to it, because if I didn't feel that, that means that I've got my eye off the ball and something really bad's going to happen. So better the illusion that I'm in control and I know the bad thing, then I'm safe and something might happen. So it was really quite a big turnaround. And there's a huge gift in this. And this is, I would say, the magic of the matrix of life, is as people find the scene of the crime and they start to unlearn it, because it's like, it's not true, but it takes a little time to unlearn it, to notice it, to take a deep breath and breathe in, thinking, thank you for reminding me who I used to be. So it's gone in the past and there's space to be present and connected here. And as they do that and they unlearn it, I have always found that the tools for their pathway reveal themselves. It's almost as if they're hidden in the shadow, they're hidden in the dark shadow of the trauma. And as the dark shadow has light on it, then the gold shadow of the tools for pathway are revealed. That was almost poetic, wasn't it?
Yeah, very sweet. Yeah, you're a poet and you don't even know it. Yeah. I like that. I like that. Yeah, no, that's some really, really great points. And I want to ask you something that I've asked a number of other people, and I've gotten feedback that it's been helpful, and I know it's helpful for me. So all the beautiful work that you're doing now in the world, and obviously you're in a good place with yourself to be able to put this this wonderful vibration out there. So if you look back, you know, all the things that you went through when you were 7 years old and being a refugee and the trauma and thinking you were going to die and your parents were going to perish and all, looking back from the place you're at now, that place of wisdom and more healthy whole being, what would you want to say to little Kenny as like a mentor and a way of healing, you know, because we do have the opportunity to go back and heal our child, you know, our childlike self. What would you say to yourself now, like the Kenny of now? What would you say to little Kenny to bring some inspiration and healing and balance and grounding into your life?
I know exactly, and it almost feels something that I very, very, very rarely talk about. And it was it was a huge imposter syndrome as a very young child. And my fear was that I would be found for being the alien. I would be found and I would be in deep trouble because I'm not like the rest of the humans. And I figured this out when I started talking. And I would have, I don't remember things that I used to say, but I used to have strange reactions from my family because I would basically name people's names that I'd never heard of that were going to die, and they'd die. Or the phone call, or someone, I remember my aunt showing up. She lived in Holland and we were in Uganda. And as the dinner table was being set, I was making a little bit of a fuss. It's like, why aren't you setting a plate? Her name was Auntie Philomena. Why aren't you setting a place for her? And as we started eating, she comes in through the door. So with all of this, I didn't know what was normal and what was not normal. I didn't know what I could talk about and what I couldn't talk about. And from being a little bit kind of spooky for the family, nice Catholic family, it's not very cool to be like this. Then I got into a kind of like evil complex. If I knew these things, should I have stopped them from happening? And then it got even worse. It got into, if I knew these things and no one else knew, did I actually make them happen? Did I cause this to happen? So it was hell. And there was no one I could speak about it with. I mean, it was later on that my parents met people and said, well, this is what's going on. But I was so isolated and so alone and so confused and so scared. And what I would say to him is, this is nature. This is normal. This is fine. And you don't have to hide it. You don't need to feel bad about it. And in time, this is the spirit that other people will want to reclaim so they can be sensitive and loving and, you know, all it is for me is a field of nature or a field of love that I wasn't as disconnected from as other people at that stage. And now everyone seems to be reconnecting to this field, which is just, how normal is that?
Well, so what's normal? What's normal anyway, you know?
Well, how natural is that?
Yeah.
So I would tell him that it's normal and that you are not causing harm. And yeah, don't go around flaunting it. Figure out which bits are okay and which bits aren't for the mainstream. But that was a very, very lonely and traumatic time. Yeah. Before even death threats, I thought I was the one that was causing the harm.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of responsibility, especially for a little guy at that time. Yeah. Growing up. So I'm glad you had the insights to you know, to come to the place that you're at now. So yes, before I forget, Kenny's got a very generous gift that he wants to offer our audience. So if you would share that, that'd be great.
Yeah, there are two parts to the work that I love to do. One of them is about this enabling men to speak and people to hear. So people are no longer their stories, and when people say things, they can be met. So as you know, I've been running the men's groups. Now, my wish, I'm 54 now, since I was 50, I've wished to just pass everything on. So if you go to mensgroups.co.uk, you can download the ground rules, and you can download the check-in round, and there are a lot of videos there as well. And you can find one other person and start communicating, because some people don't have the words, or they don't know how to go from talking about football to talking about emotions or depth or something that really matters. So consider it a game. And here's a way to just get going straight away to run a group. So that's on one hand. The other thing that's really, really important to me is people not being owned by their stories anymore. So it's almost like turning old stories into gold stories. And for me, the gold story is when I vulnerably, authentically, open-heartedly move into a bigger and better life. And that's moving into the gold story. Now, especially for the male mind, men very often want to know things before they'll change things. So if you go to themanwhisperer.co.uk, you can download the personal discovery questionnaire. So there are questions, there are lots of, as you fill in the answers, hopefully, you'll see a pattern emerge of, this is the cycle, this is what happens with men, this is what happens with women, this is what happens with friends, this is what happens with business. And then these are the characters that keep coming up, different people playing the same characters. And then behind that, if this is my story from childhood, then maybe this was my belief system. And maybe with this belief system, no wonder I've recreated the story, because I've proved myself right and I've needed to be in control. Yeah. So hopefully, here are some tools to set you free.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that, Kenny. That's awesome. So, yeah, this has been wonderful. But before we conclude, I want to give you the opportunity, one last pearl of wisdom that you want to leave with the audience that you would like to share.
Oh, here's one. Woo. So it's these little easy, simple things that mean the most. So with the whole stuff in your head is worth the gold in your mouth, very often the talking, the inner critic, the stuff that goes on in people's head, I would say slow the thinking down and listen to those words. And in that moment, ask yourself, right here and right now, is it true? And if it's not, take a deep breath and breathe it by, and make space to be true to yourself so life can meet you and lead the way.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that, man. I love that. Well, this has been awesome, Kenny. I really appreciate you joining the series today and sharing your heartfelt stories and your wisdom, and of course your gift, which the link will be below this video. So make sure you folks take a nice, good, hard look at that, because Kenny offers some beautiful things out there in the world. And thank you, my friend. Thank you very much for being here.
It's been a joy. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was great. So thank you for the work that you're doing out in the world. And to the audience, again, hopefully you enjoyed our time with Kenny today. And till the next time, continue to illuminate your path with loving kindness. Namaste.